Good morning, students. Today, from our chapter, that is improvement in food resources, we will study the three important portions, the three important part. Number one, crop protection management. Number two, storage of grains. And third will be the animal husbandry. If we will get time, we will study this one also. Before these points, in the agricultural practices, we have seen how the farmers careful regarding their crops, and we have seen that during the nutrient management, a lot of efforts given to the field for the better production of the crops. But despite the great effort, hard labor and investment of the money, the farmers again faced some other problems for their crop. What is that problem? That problem is the problem like attacks of insect pest, number one. Number two, there are diseases that also attack the plants, like the other organism which suffered usually from the different types of diseases caused by different types of pathogens like the bacteria, virus, fungi, etc. The growing crops also faced this type of problems. And number three, first I have told insect pests. First I have told insect pests. Second, diseases caused by different pathogens. And the third one is the unwanted. It is also one of the challenging threat to the farmers, unwanted crops, which is known as weeds. So this one is the certain things which require, and this insect from the protection from the insect pest, from the diseases, from the unwanted crops like the weeds is the crop management. How the farmers, agriculturists go through to protect their growing field with the attacks of insect, with the diseases and unwanted crops, that is the weeds, are known as the crop protection management. One by one we will study all these things. And the second important thing is here is storage of grains. That means after harvesting, when the grains will be stored, when the products will be stored for the market, for marketing, for the other purposes, for stock, for buffer stock, then how that will be protected in the store houses, in the warehouses, or in the storage places where they put the grains after harvesting, and how that grains will be protected. And the third one, we will study freshly the animal husbandry. That is the in which we will study today the cattle farming. That means the scientific management of rearing, caring and breeding of the livestock and the cattle is known as the animal husbandry. The animal husbandry is not a single field. It includes the other fields also, like the fish production, like the poultry, like the apiculture, etc., etc. So first we look about this crop protection management. In this part, that means the crop protection management, we will first address the weeds, the unwanted crops. Here a short definition: the practice of protecting crop plants from weeds, insects and the disease causing organisms. Weeds number 1, insect pest number 2, and diseases causing organisms, the 3. All these 3 important parts we will discuss separately. The first one here we are discussing like the weeds. Weeds are unwanted plants which grow along with the crops plants in cultivated fields. The common weeds are, here are some examples of the common weeds like the amaranthus, chenopodium, parthenium and xanthium. And what are the harmful effects? It is very common, and you also understand it that there are that the specific space which provided to grow a particular and a specific type of crop by the farmers, and that in that space, in the same space, in the same field, if the other unwanted crops are growing on a large scale, then what will happen? The weeds compete with the crop plants for nutrients. The first one, we will provide nutrient to our main crop, but that nutrient also will be taken by the unwanted or the weeds. Space, light and water. This causes reduce of the growth of the crop, as because they will take it from the same sources that will provide it to our main growing crops, and due to that reason it will be greatly impact on the production of the a specific crop which we require. And the second important harmful effect is that it can spread in a very fast manner, as because they can produce a large quantity of seeds. May you add the second point? It can spread, number 1, harmful effect, and number 2, it can spread very fast, as because it produces a large quantity of seeds. So this is the second bad impact. तो अगर हमने जिन खेतों में, जिस फील्ड में हम जिस क्रॉप को उगाना चाह रहे हैं, उसे उगाने के उद्देश्य से हमने एक अपने फील्ड में न्यूट्रिएंट दिया, इरिगेशन का बेहतर माने अरेंजमेंट किए और सारी चीज़ों को जुटाया किसानों ने, फार्मर ने, और उसमें अगर अनवांटेड प्लांट्स आकर के वो सारी चीज़ों को हथिया ले और उस पर अपना हक जमा ले, तो समझ जाइए कि जो मेन क्रॉप है वो घाटे में रहेगा और उसे भारी नुकसान का सामना करना पड़ेगा, जिससे प्रोडक्शन पर अफेक्ट पड़ेगा। तो ये 2 मैंने आपको यहाँ पर हार्मफुल इफेक्ट बताया। अब नाउ इट इज़ द मेन इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग इज हियर वी आर डिस्कसिंग अबाउट द protection management. That means these challenges are there, but how can we face, how can we counter those challenges? That will be the important things, and this is the scientific management of the agriculture. Understand? So that is why we have a lot of knowledge. We nowadays we aware with all these facts that what are the types of weeds, how they can be eliminated, and what are the types of insect and pest and how can be eliminated, and the different types of diseases which caused by the different pathogens. We know about the nature of that pathogen, like the virus, like the bacteria, like the fungus, and then we will prepare the different types of materials, substances that can eliminate those things. That's why here now we will start first how can we how can we counter, how can we defend, how can we attack, and how can we eliminate the weeds from our cropping fields. Here now look about the process of weeding. That means to remove the unwanted plants, weed from the cropping fields or crop fields. Here is the process of removing weeds from a crop field is called weeding. What are the different methods for weeding? Here, like number 1 method, mechanical method. Number 2, cultural method, or it is also known as preventive method. And number 3, here that is the chemical method. And number 4, biological method. What will happen in the mechanical method? That means by manually, when we will remove the, you have an idea about the different types of agricultural implements which you have seen in class 8. That means the khurpa here and the trowel with the help of कोई भी ऐसा टूल्स जिसकी सहायता से हम उसे फील्ड से निकाल सकें, उखाड़ के फेंक सकें, उसे काट सकें, उसे हटा सकें. तो दैट इज़ द मैकेनिकल मेथड. एंड द नंबर 2 इज़ द कल्चरल प्रिवेंटिव मेथड, यानी कि वीड को उगने नहीं दें. डू वी शुड बिफोर सोविंग आवर प्रॉपर सीड we can prepare the field in such a way that there is no possibility of the growth and development of the weeds in that particular field. So in this regard, here is some suggestions like the proper seed bed preparation, timely sowing crops, intercropping and crop rotation. This method also will be adopted. And third one, it is a very common, and but it is not good, and it is not eco-friendly, and not it is best for our environment. Like to by using weedicides, the chemical substances that will used to eradicate, to remove or to destroy the weeds. That is the 2,4-D dichloroacetic acid, and here the 4-chloro-2-methylphenoxyacetic acid. The short form is MCPA. Here is the 2,4-D and the MCPA. These are two chemical substances. This one is the very good, like the biological method. In this method, what happens? Some selected types of organism will be introduced or put into the crop field. And what is the nature? What is the special features of that type of organism which can be introduced in the field? The special nature or the special features of that kind of the organisms or the insect is that they can only harm the weeds without harming the main crops. So that is why here it is in this method, some selectively insect or other organisms are put into the crop field having weeds. We will look at some two important points in this context also, 2 or 3 examples by which you can understand it furthermore about the biological method. I have told you that I may elaborate the biological method, as it is very interesting. Grass carp, it is a type of fish. It can be introduced in the field where it will feed on the aquatic weeds or water weeds, and in this way the weeds can be eliminated. The second important thing here, the introduction of this insect, cochineal insect, can destroy upon shear. This is the weed. It can be destroyed by a specific type of insect, cochineal insect. Crops in the rotation or in the cropping pattern which during that cropping pattern, that can be also restrict growth of weeds. Similarly, it is the cattle and goats that can be allowed to graze the weeds before planting crops. This is the some ways for removing the weeds from the crop fields. Here the second important in the crop protection management, how to protect our crops from the, how we will protect our crop from the insect pests. What is this insect pest? An organism that damages a crop plant by infecting it is called a pest. The animals such as rats, mites, insect, and above all the pathogens also. In a broader way, we will also include the pathogens, but that will categorize differently. But insect pest also includes those pathogens which causes the several types of diseases in the plants. Now here, how this pest attack the crop and how they can damage the plant parts, like the number one, by cutting plant parts like roots, stems and leaves. That means the vegetative parts destroyed. The second important, insect pests suck cell sap from various plant parts. That means they can suck the cell sap. That means the protoplasmic or the other important fluid materials or the matrix of the protoplasmic part that can be sucked. They bore into stems and fruits. Stem and fruit में बोरिंग कर देना, इस तरह से, जिस तरह से कि हम लोग बोरिंग में एक पाइप इस तरह से डालते हैं ज़मीन के अंदर और उसके बाद वहाँ से पानी, तो इस तरह से ये बोरिंग कर देता है. कोई स्टेम का पार्ट है उसमें होल कर देगा, है ना, इस तरह से छेद करके इसके अंदर पूरा इसको खोखला बना देता है, बोरिंग करते चला जाता है. तो व्हाट हैपन आफ्टर द बोरिंग, देयर विल बी कंप्लीट डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ दैट पार्ट एंड दैट पार्ट विल बी वीकर, कमज़ोर हो जाएगा वो पार्ट. अब फ्रूट्स खोखला हो जाएगा, उसमें कुछ नहीं रहेगा. तो दैट इज़ द इम्पैक्ट हाउ दे destroy. Diseases in plants. The third last part in this regard is that diseases in plants. Diseases are caused in plants by pathogens. These pathogens are also cause disease in the animal and the humans also, like the bacteria, like the fungi, like the viruses. These pathogens are normally present in the environment and disperse through, in plant it will disperse through the soil, seeds, water and air. That means there are soil-borne, seeds-borne, water-borne and air-borne diseases depending upon their dispersal affinities. Here the number one, seed, soil and water-borne diseases mainly attack roots and stems. Seed, the diseases which can spread through seed, which can spread through soil, which can spread through water, they can attack roots and stems. And that type of disease which are airborne attack aerial parts such as leaves, flowers and fruits. There are several types of chemical utilized for destruction of these insect pests. They are categorically prepared, specifically prepared, like weed against weed, weedicide, like against fungi, fungicide, like against insect, insecticide, like against rodent, rodenticide. There are so many chemical substances which are to be utilized for their destruction and for their elimination. In protection management, we have seen so far there are three different factors which are responsible for destruction of crop field, and how from these three different factors, that is the weeds, insect pest and the diseases caused by different microorganisms or pathogens. But here a few points, that is the suggestion for the protection in regard to the protection of the crop. What are these suggestions. Number one, to grow resistance varieties. You have earlier also seen this one. Optimum time for sowing the crops, that means the appropriate time. Crop rotation and cropping pattern systems should be adopted, and the deploying in summers to kill weeds. So these are the some measures. If it will taken, if this will taken, then there will be a better result. That means the protection from the insect, protection from the weeds, and protection from the diseases may helpful. Protection from all those three different enemies. Now the storage of grains. Dear students, a farmer, an agriculturist always consistently from sowing time to harvesting time, focusing on their growing crops. That will started just after the selection of the seed and the cultivating fields and the provide of the nutrient management. Besides the nutrient management, again the cropping patterns and the cropping system, new methodology, and if there will be any deficiency in the cases of the nutrients or the organic materials, that will be provided additionally, and there is a well irrigation system. All this thing consistently going on. But after the harvesting, once again there is a threat to the grains. That means agricultural produce are stored in godowns or different storage structures after harvesting, where they can be attacked by again insect pest, microorganisms, resulting in great losses. This can be also maybe divisible into two parts. If we are only not talking about the insect pest, microorganism, but also we can consider some abiotic factors, and that if we'll consider, then there are two different aspects in this regard. That is, in the case of the storage of grains, we should make careful with these things, with these factors, like biotic factors, insects, rodents, fungi, mites, bacteria, and abiotic, moisture and temperature. If it will harm, how these abiotic and both abiotic and biotic factors harm the crops and losses the produce, like number one, degradation in quality, loss in weight, poor germination capability will be reduced, discoloration of produce. Or if we consider all these four, 1, 2, 3, 4 factors, then ultimately it can impact on the marketability of the produce, and that is the essential factor for an agriculturist or for a farmer. That is why we must adopt some measures to prevent the damage of grains in the storage houses, like in the storage structure, different storage structure where it can be stored for future utilization or for marketing. What are those few measures that will be taken for the protection of grains in the storage places? Now look here, how can we safely store the food grains in the different storage structures? Here are some measures. The produce can be safely stored in the storehouses or warehouses after adopting the following preventive and control measures. Number one, proper drying of the produce before storage, cleaning of the produce before storage, chemical sprays and fumigation. There are two here terms used: sprays just like the insecticide, pesticide, weedicide, fungicide, rodenticide. But I have told you earlier also the different types of chemical prepared that will be utilized. Pesticides can be sprayed in the storage structure before storing food grains. And second, fumigation, it is a method by which insect pests are exposed to fumes or vapors of chemicals without contaminating the stored food grains is called fumigation. The chemicals which are used in the fumigations, that is the ethylene dichloride and aluminum phosphide. So these are the some measures that will taken before storage the food grains in the different storage structures. That is also a part of the protection management, and this is the last part of the protection management. The dear students, you may seen here that how a farmer and agriculturist, since the sowing to the harvesting of the seed and harvesting of the crop, how they consistently careful regarding their crop fields. Now in this chapter we are in the second part of the chapter that includes the animal husbandry. The scientific process, the scientific approach towards the rearing, caring, breeding, feeding and taking control measures, preventive measures when the animal suffered by a disease, that is the animal husbandry. The science of rearing and the feeding and caring, breeding. Breeding means how can we get better variety, a breed for, like in case of the cattle farming, when we will study about the milch animal, then milch animal means that animal which can provide us milk. How we will get the longer lactation period from this type of animal that will give the more and more milk, and that how that breed will come, how that breed will available by taking some steps like with the help of the indigenous, with the help and the exotic, that can will be study. We will study all these things later on in this topic. So then we again here come the science of rearing, feeding, caring, breeding and disease control of animals is called animal husbandry. Nowadays there is a great requirement of the egg, meat, when the lifestyle has changed, and due to changing lifestyle there is also greater requirements of the meat, the flesh of the animals and the egg, and that is why, and it is the also big sources of the animal is food, of our food. That's why very essential, how can we increase the milk production, the meat production, how can we get more and more egg, milk and the meat from the animal husbandry. That is the animal husbandry. That's why animal husbandry includes the several fields. The first one is the cattle farming, where we will study the two different types of animal, like the milch animal and the drought animal. Here in our syllabus it is only essential to know that is the milch animal. And the poultry farming, where we can study about the different aspects of the chicken, that is the egg laying and the meat producing, and the fish farming, that is the pisciculture, and the beekeeping, that is the apiculture. All are included under animal husbandry. Animal husbandry is not a single field. It includes all the field. When we domesticated an animal, that is a human approach towards the animal, and that human approach after domestication may brought all these things, like we should care, we should feed them in a well manner, we can give a good shelter, we can provide appropriate shelter to them, appropriate food materials and everything, and we can also careful regarding their continuation of species, their generations, that is the breeding, and also be careful regarding the different types of diseases that may attack them. That is why here there is a various fields here you may have seen. It is not a single thing. It is rearing, feeding, caring, breeding and disease control measures. It is a different fields, and all these fields will be included under the animal husbandry, and the animal husbandry includes these different fields under which we should study about the cattle farming, we should study about the poultry farming, we should study about the fish farming or the pisciculture, we should study about the beekeeping. Here, why we need for animal husbandry? Increased production of milk, that is the white revolution. Number 2, increased in egg production, that is the silver revolution. Increased in fish production, that is the blue revolution. Now, what is cattle farming? Here the cattle farming is carried out primarily we see that there are two different purposes for the cattle farming. Number 1, milch animal that will provide milk, like the buffaloes, cow, goat, camel, milk producing animals. It is also known as dairy animals. And number 2, draught animals for agricultural work, as tilling, irrigation, plowing, carting, these are the examples, blocks, horses, mules. So these are the two different reasons for the cattle farming. Now we will study about this milch animal and what are the different species, Indian species of these milch animals, and what are the different exotic species that in Indian species it is capability for the disease resistance capability, and in the exotic, in the foreign breeds, the capability is the longer lactation period. And if these two brought together for breeding, then there will be desirable varieties available, desirable breeds available to us that will helpful in both the two different aspects, like in case of the disease resistance and in case of the longer lactation period, that will increase the milk production. In cattle farming, in Indian cattle farming, we will know that there are two important animals, cows and buffaloes. As we are talking about the milch animals, that's why these two animals give us milk. Here the cow, Bos indicus the species, and Bos bibalis the buffalo's species. Now, but we are talking about that when we need in cattle farming, we have the two different aspects. Number 1, as the Indian species or the Indian breeds are well in the disease resistivity, understand, and the exotic breeds are well and they are competent in the longer lactation period. That's why here there are examples of cattle breeds, the indigenous breeds, that means the Indian, that means our own country, Desi, and that is the Sahiwal, Gir, Red Sindhi. The exotic breeds like the Jersey from USA, Brown Swiss from Switzerland, and Holstein Friesian from Holland. So these are the some species breeds of the cattle. And what are the management? What are the things which included under the cattle farming? Just you have seen under the animal husbandry that there is a rearing, caring, feeding, breeding, and protection, giving them protection from the different types of diseases. That means we need three important fields for the cattle farming. That is the shelter management. Shelter management, the first one. Number two, feeding management. It is very important part. Just you have seen in cases of the plants or the crops, how they can manage by our farmers, how can their management starting from the sowing to the harvesting. Just like that here also in case of the animal husbandry, we also see here that how they can be consistently require a care, a nursing, and that includes the shelter, the feeding, the disease management. That's why we may categorize cattle farming and their management into the three different categories. Number one, shelter management. Number two, feeding management. Number three, disease management. Now look about a brief idea about all these three managements separately. The management which includes the three different aspects earlier we have seen. The first one here, a brief idea, and the second one again here the feeding management. The second one that and their brief idea is here, and the first one and their brief idea is here. The third one we will discuss later on. The first one you may see here, shelter management. जहाँ हम उसे रखते हैं, किस ढंग से उसको रखा जाए, वो स्थान कैसा होना चाहिए, उसे किस तरह से देखभाल करना चाहिए. उसके साथ साथ यहाँ पे केयरिंग का भी पॉइंट शामिल है, जैसे रेगुलर ब्रशिंग ऑफ एनिमल्स टू रिमूव डर्ट एंड लूज हेयर, जो उसे साफ सुफ करना है. Providing shelter under ventilated roofed sheds that protect them from rain, heat and cold. And the sloping floor of the shed. The sloping floor will may escape out the water and the other dirty materials immediately, and there will be no retention of the water and the things there. And that's why these are the some points. And here the feeding management is very important part, just like that of the nutrient management. It is the feeding management, maintenance food, and the second one is important, the milk producing food. As we are talking about the management about the milk animals that will provide us milk, and dairy, that is known as also dairy animals. The maintenance food, it contains all the nutrients, like starting from the carbohydrate to the vitamins. You have an idea about the animals, the human being. Similarly here also may be some other differences, but overall the similar thing, and that nutrients for the general health of cattle. And the second important, a specific requirement during the lactation period or during the pregnancy, there is a special requirement of the food materials, and that food materials will be provided, and the food materials will provided them are may be divisible into the two important part. And the third one is here a special, that is the feed additives, which are rich in micronutrients, vitamins. It is additives, but these two are the basics. Number one, roughage, which are rich in fiber, and the concentrate rich in protein and the nutrients. Understand? So these are the concentrate food materials and the roughage food materials, which are rich in fiber, and these are the rich in nutrients, like the and rich in also protein. And there are the third one is the feed additives rich in macronutrients, vitamins, etc. It can promote in three ways the cattle farming and our cattles, like the promote the growth of cattle, stimulate milk production and protect them from the diseases. So this one is the two different points in connection with the management. Here the third important conditions for cattle farming. The first one we have discussed, the second one we have discussed already. Now the third one, disease management. Cattle are prone to a number of diseases which can cause their death or poor milk production or lower milk production. A healthy cattle can be differentiated from a diseased cattle by, how can we differentiate a healthy and a diseased cattle? Number one, regular feeding. If they don't feed, if there is a loss of appetite, भूख की कमी अगर हो जाए, खाना पीना छोड़ दे, तो वो एक पहचान है उसका कि वो बीमार है. नॉर्मल पॉस्चर, ढंग से वो अपना जिस तरह से उसको खड़ा रहना चाहिए या जिस तरह से उसको बैठना चाहिए, जिस अंदाज से, जिस मैनर से, अगर वो मैनर नहीं दिख रहा है उसके बैठने में, उठने में, खड़े होने में, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि उसको बीमारी है. And the body temperature, definite body temperature, regular pulse and blood pressure. So these are the some special features that may differentiate between the disease and healthy. That means one who affected and one who not affected. Now, what are the different agents which causes diseases in the animals or the cattle about whom we are talking? Like, diseases are caused by several parasites and other infectious agents. Here parasites, if there is a parasites for the animals, then it may be of the two types, that is the external or maybe the internal. That may be they can live within the body, or they may not live, but they can only feed from outside, externally. So that means these are the lice, ticks, mites. May you know that this may be the external parasite, and the worms and flukes, these are the internal parasites. And here the agents like the bacteria, virus and fungus. These are the three important infectious agents besides the parasites. And there are few diseases which I have here mentioned, like the number one, anthrax due to the bacteria, tuberculosis, bacterial disease, and the foot and mouth disease, viral disease, and cowpox. This is also a viral disease. And here the one example is ringworm for the fungus disease. So here are some disease and their examples. So this is the disease. There is a vaccination arrangement also, the medicines also, there is a regular checkup, and there is a medicines available for the cattle, for our dairy animals, and that's why we have to be careful regarding their abnormalities and consult the veterinary doctors. Now today we have a lot of things we have discussed, and I hope that you understood everything, and also I have provided you the brief notes upon all the things, and in the next class we will discuss about the poultry farming, fisheries and the beekeeping.